Screamers. Keith Hopwood, English pop and rock musician, singer-songwriter, composer. Welcome to Creative Cuppa.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. So, Keith, we were talking the other day about the fact that you can almost divide your career in two. You were the guitarist for the amazing Herman's Hermits in the 60s.
Yeah.
And you're also the composer for some of the UK's wonderful film and TV for kids.
Yeah.
Let's start with Herman's Hermits. How did you start with them? What was your journey like?
It was a fascinating journey which went beyond all expectations. I was a 14-year-old kid with a guitar and tunnel vision in that, that's all I was interested in. It just encompassed everything. I started a band when I was 14, 15, and there was 5 of us in that band, and we did the usual, working men's clubs and that sort of thing. And at the same time, there was this other band who eventually asked me to join them. So I joined up with them, and we carried on from there. We got lucky with the local TV, Granada TV. Johnny Hamp, who ran the entertainment side of it, then gave us 3 or 4 slots over different weeks. So after these had been shown, in the space of a couple of months, we were pretty hot stuff. Well, we were in Granada land anyway. We still had no record deal, but eventually our manager came across Mickey Most, who was an independent producer who just had a big hit with the Animals and House of the Rising Sun. Mickey came up with I'm Into Something Good, which had been a small hit for Earl Jean and the Cookies in America. And we were off. And he was just a genius at producing pop singles, he finding the right material, whether it was a cover version from the 50s or, a new song that had come out. He just sort of had the magic touch with it. And for us starting out, really the holy grail is just, first of all, just to make a record. Then secondly, to hear it on the radio. And that's kind of it. Nobody really thinks further than that. So when it did, it was number 1 in like 3 weeks' time. It was just so fast. And then within about 2 months, it had done the same in America. So they all kicked off over there. So it really was mind blowing.
Wow. It's a very young age, isn't it, to be kind of exposed to that level of fame?
It was.
Almost overnight. You were on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Yeah, a few times, yeah.
What was that like to have that sort of spotlight put on you at such an early age, very, very quickly? What did that feel like?
It was totally bizarre. I mean, we were popular over here, but in America, it was sort of 10 times the reaction. Things like the Ed Sullivan Show, which is done in the middle of Manhattan, and so, of course, everybody knows you're there. So the streets are full. I mean, it was just manic. And we were all, 18, 19, something like that. Peter was the youngest. He was probably 17. I was probably 18 by then, so...
knocking on a bit.
Yeah, knocking on a bit, yeah.
You mentioned that you were... 26 when you left?
Well, yeah, about that. Yeah, it was kind of various things happened, we had a record company problem in America, which kind of just puts the mockers on it because you're not getting any product out. So that kind of finished, and we had a lot of hits around the world after that for another few years. And then Peter decided he was going to, be the next big star in Las Vegas. And so we kind of split up. We carried on for a bit, did a whole album of self-written stuff. But then it started going sort of a bit backwards, so I decided I'd rather put my energy into my company, Pluto, which I'd already started. Yeah. So I left, and I had this little studio in Stockport, and we started doing music for commercials initially, and invented a whole system of getting sound onto local commercials, which were the very cheapest form of advertising on TV. And we came up with a way of not changing the visual side of it, but completely changing the audio. So instead of a live announcer, you would get, an orchestra, voices, anything you want, And we sold this all the way around the country. We were making commercials for every TV station in the UK. which, you know, for 2 or 3 years, we had that to ourselves. And then that, you know, that ended. And it was around this time that Malcolm Rowe and myself, who was my writing partner by then, I met up with Mark Hall and Brian Cosgrove.
Right. Yes.
They went on to become the legendary Cosgrove Hall Films. They'd left Granada and started their company, and they'd done a couple of shows. In fact, I think we did the first show that they did, called Sally and Jake. And then they moved on from that setup and set up the Cosgrove Hall that we knew then. And we then went on to do lots of different shows for The Wind in the Willows, which was a big one, which we tried to keep it all up here in the north, as it were, but it was totally orchestral. And we then went on to do about 65 episodes of it after the feature, and that went on for a good few years. We then did the BFG, the Roald Dahl story, so we did that and carried on with them. And of course, from that, we then got into working with other people on different shows, mainly animation shows. You know, we were still doing an awful lot of commercials. I mean, the commercials were at that point in Manchester, the agencies had quite a few big national accounts. I don't think it's quite the same anymore, but they were based up there, not in London. So we had some really good, some juicy, you know, commissions there. We basically built all the studios.
Yeah. So going back a bit, Keith, playing in a band, writing music for advertising, writing music for animation and kids programming, you know, you have different approaches for those. So what was that transition like for you? Did you just throw yourself in and think, well, I'll just figure it out?
Well, yeah, and it was a bit more gradual than that. I mean, the stuff that we'd written for the band, which when we'd done our own album after Peter had left, was quite sort of country rock sort of stuff. But then, even then, there's a year's time before it gets to the point where I leave. So it's not as if I was doing one thing one day and then, you know, how do you write a jingle the next? And it was very toe in the water. I mean, you know, the most difficult thing when you're starting in a new thing like, I want to write for commercials, is the first thing they say is, what have you done? And you say, nothing. And we had one creative director who was really great, Ken Bowden. We have a big agency in Manchester called Bowden Dybel Hayes, BDH. And he was lovely. He was a real character. And he said, there you go, there's a script, get on. You know, I mean, so we did it, and we had one to actually do. I don't think it ever got made, but the point was it got us going, and then they gave us more work. And, you know, bit by bit, you do that. And obviously, jingles is, I suppose, more akin to the animation stuff than writing full-blown songs, you know. But it was a gradual thing, which you stick your toe in the water and try it, and then you know, when you get it wrong, you adapt, and hopefully you get better.
So you very casually mentioned Wind in the Willows and BFG there.
Yeah.
I don't think they should be underestimated in their impact on kids at the time.
The Wind in the Willows, which is still, you know, I still get emails about it, and we made an audio version of it after the event, which is still, people still buy around the world and, you know, talk about it. It's incredible. But at the time, it was quite an event, because the literary property had just come out of copyright. And so Cosgrove Hall were in there and were adapting it. Well, obviously, this job, doing the feature, takes years, you know, 2 or 3 years. And what happened during the course of the 2 or 3 years? They changed the law again, and it went back into copyright.
Oh, my word.
But because they started it, they were allowed to finish it off. But then it stayed in copyright for like another 10 years or something.
Yeah.
But it was a really big deal. We had a royal premiere in the West End in Leicester Square for the feature, you know, which you don't often get with a, you know, animation series. And you know, the talent that was on it were just incredible. You know, there was Sir Michael Horder and David Jason, and you know, Ian Carmichael was on the feature. He played Ratty. And the quality of it, which is why I think it still lasts now, you know. I mean, I still get people saying, well, every so often we dig one out and watch it, because the quality of the voices and the script, you know, were just second to none.
Yeah.
So it was a real privilege to be asked to do it in the first place, you know. But Mark, it was Mark's baby more than Brian, because Mark was the stop frame side of it, and Brian was more the drawn side of it. But Mark was very keen on his music, and very encouraging. And I think he was happy with what we got in the end,
Absolutely. I have to admit, when we first met, I went home and rewatched the BFG, and it so stands up. I think it was on Amazon. This was. It might still be there. This was a few years ago, but nice little segue. You recently re-released the soundtrack to the BFG, didn't you?
Yes, it's something I'd wanted to do for years and just not got around to it. So we dug out the masters for it and remastered all the things and managed to get some extra bits in it and put it out as a CD. Yeah, so that's there as well.
That's
now.
Brilliant. I'll put that link in the show notes. For you. Moving on, and also moving backwards, Pluto is still going strong. It's changed a little bit recently.
The origins of Pluto were, I was still in the band, and Peter got a film to do, which was going to take him like 2 months to shoot this film in the States. So, of course, we couldn't work as a band for 2 months. So Lek and I, who was the guitarist, decided we should do something. So we built the studio, not really knowing what to do with it. Obviously, we could record songs in it, but that was about it. It wasn't meant to be a big commercial studio. It was a little demo studio in Stockport. And we did that, and then we moved on from that. And then when I quit the band and went into it, Lek had bowed out by that time. He wasn't really interested in that side of it. So, I mean, that's why it started so early, why it'd been going so long. I was in the band for probably another 3 or 4 years after we started the company and the studio. And it's trundled on, ever since. But we were talking last year, and my son, Dan, wanted to get into this side of the business. He's always been in music, had a little production company. He writes and plays a very good guitar. And he kind of wanted to get into this side of it. And I said, well, we've got this company here, which has been around for quite a long time. We've got quite a few big credits. We should adapt it all. So what we've done is we've, had a new website. It's still Pluto, but there are actually 3 of us now. There's myself, Dan, and a guy called Andy Crutwell-Jones, who's done a lot of work more in the record business, but also done quite a few kids' shows. He did Bill and Ben, the record of it, and Fun Song Factory and things like that, and a couple of tracks in America for big live shows that he's done. So it's quite a varied mixture. We're not all the same, He doesn't do what I do and I don't do what he does.
That's the way.
And the idea was to just broaden it out and really to try and compose and produce music for a wider field than just TV animation, which is a long-term project. It's a long-term just getting involved with one, and then they take forever to make. So, and also if you've got 1 or 2 of those on the go, you can't really do much else because they take up a lot of time. Yeah. So the idea was to have more people and go for more different types of commissioned music. So that's what we're doing. I mean, the coronavirus has kind of slowed that down a bit because it's a bit difficult to go and meet people. But we're getting there, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I will put all those links in the show notes for you, for people to go and find you.
Lovely.
But for now, Keith Hopwood, thank you so much for joining me for a cuppa.
Thank you very much, Gareth. Good to talk.